Well, hello everybody, my name's Louise Savage. Welcome to my channel, Louise Savage Muses. A warm welcome back if you are a returning viewer, bless you, and an equally warm welcome if you are viewing my channel for the very, very, very first time. So I am really beyond excited today because I think I have had my best ever in my life, with the possible exception of summer holidays when I was a kid. The best ever reading month. I can't believe it. I've read an awful lot in July, and pretty much all of the books that I've read have been absolutely amazing. And I don't know whether that's because I've read quite a few books that I've been really looking forward to. I've kind of treated myself this month, excuse me, to books that I kind of was itching to read and kind of knew I would like. I'm not sure, but it has been absolutely blistering. So it could be a long one, this. Brace yourself, go and make a cup of tea. Or go and get a glass of wine. I don't know. You might be on holiday for all I know. Make yourself comfortable. Well, you'll know, won't you, actually, how long this video is going to be. Sooner than I do. Anyway, so first up is my book of the month. So you might have already heard me talk about this. And this is England Is Mine by Nicolas Padamsee. And I hadn't come across this book. It was sent to me by Serpent's Tail, the publisher, very kindly. And I don't think it would have come under my radar had that not happened, although it has got a fantastic cover and maybe it would have drawn my attention in the bookshop, I'm not sure. I don't think it's been out very long. But I was bowled over by this book. I think it's very political. It explores the plight of the contemporary teenager, particularly, I suspect, living in a city, but not necessarily. And I do think this could be, you know, issues that are recurring all over the world. It's definitely a quintessentially English perspective on it. But I think because one of the themes of this book is gaming. Bear with me. So this is the story of two teenage boys. They're in the older end of their teenage years, so they're hovering between school and college. David has been badly bullied in his youth. He's quite a loner. His parents have split up. His mum has a new partner who David struggles to get along with, even though his stepfather, I think, probably has his best interests at heart. And his mother is Iranian and really wants the best for David, wants him to get a good education. But David is drifting. David has decided he's not going to go on to college, and he's spending an awful lot of time gaming. Meanwhile, we have another young man, Hassan, who is from a Muslim background. And again, his family, I think the mothers, in a sense, are very similar in terms of what they want for their young men. But Hassan has a different situation. He's got lots of friends, but he's really works very hard at school. He's very diligent, and he's drifting away from his friends because they are becoming increasingly violent and interested in things that just don't interest him. Hassan also is really into gaming, so Hassan plays FIFA and David plays COD, Call of Duty. And through gaming, particularly David, latches onto an online community. And I think the way that Nicolas Padamsee writes about this book confronts racism, it confronts bullying, it confronts peer pressure, it confronts the difficulty of communication between parents and teenagers. David is kind of moving between his mum's household, which is relatively secure, and his father. He spends more time living with his father, but his father is really struggling, and the house is not very hygienic, and so, you know, David is sort of getting more and more frustrated by, and I suppose he's struggling to understand, you know, his own personal identity. And the way that the plot unfolds, it's the narrative flits between both boys, and you see things from both their perspectives. But you also have sections of the text that are written through as if they're online chats represented on the page. Don't let that put you off. I thought it was a really fascinating insight into youth culture. And also the other dimension is that David has a kind of a music idol that he's really into, and this music idol says something online which is really provocative, and he's cancelled, and the whole way that affects David and the way that it shifts his politics and it shifts his worldview is very fascinating. So there's also lots of stuff in here about the impact of social media as well. So I thought it was a really thoughtful, clever, pacey. I read it very quickly, having had...
There's nothing to read.
I don't know what that voice was. That seemed to be coming from my computer. I don't quite know why. I don't know why it's talking to me all of a sudden. So yeah, I found it really, really fascinating. It really engaged my attention. And the ending was absolutely superb. Really, really thought it was clever and packed a punch. So there we are. England is mine. And then on and off through the month, I've been dipping into this. So this is Gerbrand, who's a comedian who's very big in the UK. I really quite enjoy her. She's quite potty-mouthed, but she's very interesting. She was a psychiatric nurse at some point in her life. And I was looking forward to reading this. Unfortunately, it's called A Load of Old Balls, and you kind of get the impression of the book from the back. And basically, she's sort of retelling the stories of men from history, from our culture. So we've got George Best, the footballer. We've got, who have we got here? Genghis Khan. We've got all sorts of men from history. And she's kind of retelling their history in a comedic way. Now this book came out, I should imagine, about 20 odd years ago, and I just felt it was really dated. It kind of made me wince a bit. So although some of it I found entertaining, I wouldn't be rushing out to recommend it, I'm afraid. Sorry, Joe. And next up was The Twin by Gerbrand Bakker. I hope I've pronounced his name correctly. Now he's a writer from the Netherlands. And I picked this up at some point last summer, I think. Lovely cover look, all that beautiful summery blue, which may be why I chose it, I'm not sure. And cows on the front, and I live near a dairy farm, so that sort of triggered something. I think this book is stunning. It tells the story of, now I want to say Helma. I'm rubbish with names, aren't I? You've noticed this. Yes, Helma. And Helma was a twin, but unfortunately his brother died when they were in their late teens, early 20s. And Helma lives on a dairy farm in the Netherlands, and it was his brother who was kind of really into farming, and Helma went off to university to get an education, but he has to abandon that when his brother dies and come back, and the expectation, or he feels the expectation, is to take over the farm. And as the novel starts, Helma has just moved his father upstairs in the old farmhouse that they live in. He's started to strip out lots of furniture, paint the walls white. He's sort of stamping himself on the farm because his father is dying. And it's very clear that there have been real issues between Helma and his father. And so we've got this old man upstairs dying away. And what happens is there's disruption because his twin's former girlfriend turns up, and Helma ends up having her son to come and stay in the house with him and his father. And it doesn't sound like, this is not a plot-driven story, but what is absolutely wonderful is all the relationships in this book. I absolutely loved the relationship between Helma and his father, the relationship between Helma and
the next door neighbour and her children and her husband, who you never see, and there's quite a bit of humour around that. This book is poignant, it's funny, it's tragic, it's just and it's filled with the most fantastic descriptions of rural life and rural landscape, and it's not boring. I enjoyed every single minute of this book. That sounds like damning with faint praise, but that's really not what I'm doing. So I found this book just wonderful. If you're somebody who enjoys things like Marilyn Robinson, her writing, I think you would really enjoy this. It's so observant about human nature, and Helmer is in some ways, you know, a farmer very set in his ways, but he's also got horizons that he wants to chase. So yeah, I mean, I'm walking around that farmhouse in my head right now, because it's stayed with me so much. And also there's quite a lot in here about his relationship with the animals. He's got this pet donkey, which is quite an interesting character. So I can't recommend this highly enough. I thought it was fabulous. And then I pulled this one off the shelf just at random and just fell in love with the cover. So this is Mr. Macamee by Esther Freud. And those flowers on the front are fritillaries, and they appear in the late spring in the UK. And the design really caught my attention. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I fancy reading a hardback. So I was in the mood for a hardback. I was looking at what hardbacks I'd got. And fritillaries, for some reason, are one of the only plants that will grow in my lawn. And I've gradually been sort of encouraging them and sowing new ones and planting them over the last few years, and they're really starting to take hold, and I just think they are stunning. They nod their heads in the breeze, and they're just at that time of the year when you really want some hope for things starting to really grow in your garden. The only downside is that I don't like mowing over them, so I end up having to mow around them, and it's a bit of a pain in the bum, but never mind. So anyway, so that really grabbed me, and I thought the illustration looked familiar. I didn't really think anything about it, and didn't really think about who Mr. Mac was until I started reading it. So this tells the story of a young boy, I think his name's Will. Forgotten. No, it's not Will at all. He's called Thomas Maggs. And this young boy is growing up in Suffolk. So Suffolk's a beautiful county in the sort of south east of England. And he's growing up, and it's the onset of the First World War. And what Esther Freud does so beautifully in this novel, and it has a connection with the previous one I've talked about in this sense, is she really depicts rural life in Suffolk at that period. So Thomas, for example, is apprenticed to a rope maker. And he's learning how to do that, and his relationship with the rope maker, who's quite grumpy, and Thomas does try his patience, is just really lovely. So Thomas grows up in a pub. His father runs the pub, but it's a rat and a cheese seller situation. His father takes to drink, and when he's really drunk, he beats Thomas's mum. He's abusive. So there's all of that horror going on, and Thomas has a talent for art. He can draw, and so even though he's quite a young child, he's very capable of rendering, particularly the sea and boats, because he lives on the coast, and he really wants to go to sea, but he has something wrong with his leg, so that's a very unlikely possibility for him at that period in time. And one day he's on the coast, and he sees this man, this very strange man who he's never seen before, with a spyglass looking out to sea. And when this man speaks, he's got a really strange voice because he's Scottish, and of course Thomas has never met anyone Scottish, and it's only Charles Rennie Mackintosh. I mean, the clue was there and in the name Mr. Mac. So Charles Rennie Mackintosh and Thomas Maggs and Charles Rennie Mackintosh's wife form a lovely relationship, and they kind of encourage Thomas with his art. And so you learn a lot about the Mackintosh family, not just Charles and his wife, but also the wider family. I had no idea that he'd ended up in Suffolk during the war. and there are all sorts of parallels between Thomas and Charles, which are beautifully sort of, what's the word, depicted. It took me a few chapters to get into this. I was close to DNFing it quite early on, and I am so glad I didn't, because it just gives me a really wonderful feeling when I think about reading it. I would say it's a real comfort read, is how I would describe it, and it's yeah, it's just a beautiful piece of writing. I'm really glad I encountered it. And then, now Simon of Savage Reads, my son, has been nagging me to read this book. And this, I've got it the right way around, yes I have. This is clear. It's not very clear in this copy. I don't know, was this a proof? Yeah, it's a proof copy, that's probably why. And this is by Carys Davies. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a little while, you'll know that I absolutely love, particularly Carys Davies's short stories. I think they're sensational. And I've really enjoyed her novels as well. But my goodness, is she really honing her craft. It's interesting that the novel's called Clear, because I would say she writes some of the clearest, crispest, freshest prose that of any contemporary writer. I just absolutely adore her writing style. And this is a really unusual, quirky theme, I think, of this book, or at least situation, context is probably, it's the context that's quirky. So there are three characters in this story, three really sort of beautifully defined, very real, very carefully drawn characters. So there's the character of John Ferguson, who is a Scottish priest. I don't know if that's the right word. And this is during the Victorian era, the late Victorian era, I think. And he, there's a break in the church, because the Scottish church is very tied to the landowners. The landowners choose who becomes the priest of each parish. And John Ferguson really objects to this, so he breaks away and forms this new church. And as a result, he plunges himself and his wife Mary into poverty. I hope she's called Mary. I think she is. Into poverty, and they have no money. So all he can do, he's desperate to try and get some money together. So he agrees to be paid to be a factor. And he goes across to this really remote Scottish island, right up in the north, right up towards Scandinavia. It's quite a treacherous journey to get there. And this island is inhabited by one man, Ivor. And John's job is to remove Ivor from the island. He no longer has the right to be there. The landowner wants him out. And that's what John is sent on this mission to do. And Ivor has lived on the island all his life. He's never left it. There's been a lot of tragedy in his past. There are a few buildings on this island, plenty of sheep and animals, but he's led this incredibly solitary existence. And the novel explores the meeting point between John and Ivor and how their relationship develops, but also the impact that this has on Mary as well back home. And it's just, there is so much in here. I mean, it's the characters, it's the relationships. One of the things that Carys Davies does here is looks at isolation and the impact of that and different ways of being isolated. But she also, and I wonder whether the pandemic affected that, I don't know, I'd love to ask her. But she also looks at language, because Ivor speaks this dying language. It's some sort of bizarre kind of Scots Scandinavian dialect. And so when John Ferguson tries to, they just can't communicate to start with. And John Ferguson kind of perseveres. So it's about, you know, all these wonderful, if you love words, you will love this book, because it's full of all this wonderful, these wonderful words from this fabulous language. It's it's rich in so many ways. The portrayal, excuse me, it's also about, you know, how harsh life can be in terms of the elements. The elements are really, really present on the island. And there are some beautiful moments. There's a fantastic episode at the beginning of the book which involve a set of false teeth. And I can't say more because it would spoil it. And at the end of the novel, there's the most wonderful metaphor which involves a Chinese spoon. And I would read it to you, but again, it might give too much away. So I just think she is a writer at the absolute top of her game, and I cannot wait to see what she does next. I just think she is, it's so powerful, this novel. Yeah. I think I liked it. And then I thought I need something really, really different. So I picked up American Spy. This seemed to me like, this is by Lauren Wilkinson. I've had this book on my shelves for a while. My husband read it quite a while ago. And it was one of Barack Obama's summer reads. I don't know what year it was, whenever. And I kind of, to me, I associate sort of spy novels with beaches and holidays. So I was trying to get myself into a kind of holiday mood, even though I'm retired and, you know, life in theory is one long holiday. And again, I found this book really fascinating. I couldn't put it down. So it tells the story of, I think, yes, she's called Marie. Oh, get these names right. Marie, Mary, I don't know, Ivor, John Ferguson, who. And she is growing up in the US. She's black. Her father's a policeman. And she joins the FBI. But she's sidelined. So it's almost like she's a sort of token black woman in that job. So she's not getting any cases. And then she gets, what's the word, groomed for an infiltration operation in Burkina Faso. And it's all to do with her, basically, she's being called upon because she's a very attractive young woman to seduce the president of the country. And it's a fascinating look at the way that the US meddles in politics in other countries. It's a very political novel. There's a real kind of interesting side to it in that the novel is written as a kind of almost, it's not a letter, but a sort of confession to her twin boys who are 4, and they don't know who their father is. And so she's writing this text to explain to them some of the decisions that she's made in her life and so on. And it's also really further sort of entanglement and interest because her mother did not bring her up. Her mother moved to Martinique when she was younger, and there's a really good plot line involving her sister as well. Her sister has died, and she really admired her sister. Her sister wanted to be a spy. Blah blah blah. So there's a fantastic plot line that evolves around that, and so there's a kind of kick-ass element to this, I guess. One of the warnings that I would sort of put out about this book is that because she's writing it to her children, at the beginning I found it very clunky because she addresses them as you and she addresses them individually. So she'll write a chunk and she'll put, you know, it'll be dialogue and she'll put the kid's name and then you said. And I found that really, really intrusive and irritating. Fortunately, it doesn't happen too often as you get into the book, but I didn't, for me, that really, really didn't work. But apart from that, you know, I really did enjoy reading this, and the twists and turns towards the end as well were really enjoyable. And then finally, just when I thought it could not get any better, I picked up the Axeman's Carnival. Now, this was sent to me by wonderful Rachel all the way from New Zealand. I was so grateful to her. And it's by Chidgey. Now, I read Remote Sympathy, which was shortlisted or longlisted was shortlisted for the Women's Prize several years ago. I read her novel Pet last year. But this, for me, even though I think the Axeman's Carnival came out before Pet, I think this is an amazing novel. So you'll see that there is a magpie on the front. And the whole story, brace yourself, is narrated from the point of view of a magpie. And I was like, really? Can that be a thing? Is it going to work? It does. So the young woman, and again, I'm just trying to remember her name now. Here we go. What's she called? Marnie. It's all the M's today. Marnie is living in New Zealand on a sheep farm with her husband, who is the Axeman in the title. And Marnie rescues this magpie chick. It falls out of the nest. She rescues it. She takes it into the house, and she gets very close to it. She's lost a baby of her own, and she sort of really mothers this chick, and it starts to talk. It talks to her, it talks to her husband, it picks up things from the TV. Husband sits there watching lots and lots of really gruesome crime dramas. And the sense of unease, because it's giving nothing away to tell you that Marnie is in a really, really abusive relationship with her husband. The sense of unease that builds throughout this novel is amazing, and it's all through the magpie's eyes. So the magpie is, you know, able to access all areas in and out the house, and the magpie starts to glean lots of information. Now, running parallel with that, the magpie also becomes an internet success, as you can imagine, because it can talk. So that sends the novel on lots of sort of twists and turns, because the sheep farm is failing. You know, that they are really, the climate change has meant that the land is very dry. They've got real issues with trying to get water. Everything that can go wrong does go wrong. The house needs lots of repair work. You know, they really are living in straitened circumstances. And what's really clever is that Catherine Chidgey allows some empathy for the husband, because he is, you know, the lives that they are living are really, really hard. Marnie's mother and sister and brother-in-law live next door as well, so you've got that kind of extra lens. And the magpie, who's called Tama, after Tamagotchi, you have to read it to find out why. Tama is occasionally returning to his magpie family, and again there's all that sort of, it's really clever because he's kind of chosen to stay in the house, and so the conflict between his natural family and his adoptive family is really, really well played out. I think that's really clever. You know, he's lost his identity. He's not a magpie anymore. He's not a proper member of the family. All of that kind of thing going on as well. There is so much in this book. It's got some very, very important things to say about domestic violence, I think. And the plot is excellent, you know. And again, it's quite a chunky book, but I read it very, very, very quickly. So I was really grateful that I was sent this beautiful copy. Thank you so much, Rachel. Yeah, so what a month. I don't know how August is going to pan out, but I can't really see that it's going to get any better than this, but you never know, never say never. So I hope you've had a really fantastic reading month too. I hope you've got some wonderful sparkly books to tell me about. Please mention them in the comments below, and hopefully speak to you all soon. Bang on about some more books. Should I say muse? Take care, everybody. Bye.